Hello, Rama Rama Pupodu. Hope all are in good health, feeling relaxed, having a peaceful life, and happy always. Now let's go to chapter 5 Goa Frontier Supa. First part Orange robe counts for a badge of thieves. Onwards they went until they reached Karwar, where they stopped at a dharmashala. Next morning they resumed their journey. At about 4 o'clock in the evening, they sighted a river which they had to cross. Here they witnessed a wondrous spectacle. Thousands of men, women, and children had assembled on both the banks of the river, and still large numbers were streaming to the spot from opposite directions. On enquiry, they learned that in the mid river were half a dozen crafts floating with a famous sadhu by the name Sachi Anand in one of them, and the large crowds of people had come for his darshan. Each pilgrim carried with him or her a coconut perfumed pastils or agarbattis and some champur as offerings to the sadhu. The devotion of these simple country folk was indeed marvelous. Truly, faith strikes its deep roots more easily in the unsophisticated minds of villagers than in those of the so-called civilized people of the cities. The river was duly crossed, and Ramdas and Ramcharandas reached in the evening a village where they stopped for the night in the temple of a goddess. Here they had come near the Goa province, a Portuguese territory, the frontier lying a few miles off. Next day by noon they arrived at the frontier. When they were about to pass the gate, their progress was rudely arrested by a huge dog, which stood on the path barking ominously at them. From a hut a few yards to the right, a man called out, "You cannot pass unless you give an account of yourselves here. Come here, both of you." Accordingly, they went up to the hut. The man, a Roman Catholic, was the gatekeeper. He explained, on seeing their clothed, dyed in Garua, that the Goa government had issued a circular that no sadhus should be permitted to enter the territory. "Why are they so hard on sadhus?" queried Ramcharandas. "Sadhus, fine fellows they are," said the gatekeeper, with a spice of sarcasm. "Recently, a rich man's house was robbed by a wandering sadhu in Goa, and the police are still after him. Hence the order for their exclusion. So you had better retrace your steps as you came." "Brother, do you think," Ramcharandas asked, "that we belong to that type of sadhus?" And added, "We assure you we mean no ill to anybody. Mine is not to judge who is a true and who is a false sadhu. I am here only to obey orders. You cannot pass," he replied firmly. Ramcharandas utilized to the full all his powers of eloquence and persuasion, but in vain, for he was looking forward most eagerly to visit to the Kula Devi temple of Goa, the original temple which commanded allegiance from all Saraswats of southern India. After repeated appeals, the gatekeeper said, "I can allow you to go in one condition, and it is that you should change your clothes. That is, give up the colored ones for a plain white and must pass off as an ordinary traveler and not as sadhus." Ramdas was all along watching the scene. Now Ramcharandas turned to him with a questioning look. "Ram," said Ramdas, "it appears to be God's will that we should not step into the Goa territory. As regards changing the cloth, Ramdas for one is not for it. He would prefer to go back rather than to do anything against the will of God dwelling in his heart. Surely it is his pleasure that we should turn back." They left the place, and before dark regained the village from which they had started, and spent the night in a small room of a rest house. Ramcharandas was sorely disappointed. Next morning they went to the bazaar, where a kind shopkeeper, a Catholic, suggested that they might travel to the north via Kadra, to which place they could go by a ferry boat. The shopkeeper fed them with some biscuits and bread. Then, going to the riverside, they leapt into a large boat bound for Kadra. A fee of 1 anna each had to be paid, which charge Ramcharandas met from the few annas he owned. The boat moved on slowly with many a halt on the way because it was carrying also some cargo. However, at dusk they reached Kadra. As night advanced, severe cold set in. Having found no room in the local rest house, they sought shelter on the open veranda of the village headman's office, which stood directly facing the river. A cold breeze had by now begun to blow from the river. Here again the night was spent in a manner similar to the one in the rock chamber on the Ramatirtha hill. Early at daybreak, they started. Now they had to traverse a path along the gradual ascent of a hill through a dense jungle. Some travelers who carried long sticks with a spear at one end coming from the opposite direction warned them against wild bears. When the Lord's name was on their lips, where was fear? As usual, Ramdas walked at a brisk pace, with Ramcharandas close behind him. At noon, they reached a small village where a halt was made. After bath, they ate a few boiled potatoes and, resting for an hour, started again. The jungle extended still further. They now traveled on a level ground and legged on. At sunset, they reached the village, Kurmawadi. That day, from daybreak to sunset, they had covered 36 miles, the distance from Kadra to Kumarwadi. That's all, folks. Let's see in the next chapter. Thank you. Bye bye. Rama Rama Pupodu.